Welcome back to the Deep Dive, your direct pipeline to being genuinely well-informed. I'm really excited to guide you through today's exploration. We're calling this the Complete Aviation Solutions Deep Dive number 110.
That's right.
Our mission, like always, is to dive into a fascinating stack of recent reports, analyses from the aviation world, pulling out those, really crucial nuggets of knowledge.
Yeah, the things that matter.
Exactly. We're going to unpack some, frankly, surprising strategic shifts, innovative ways companies are thinking about their workforce, and even a looming global capacity challenge.
A big one.
A big one indeed. Our goal is to really connect these pieces, which might seem separate at first, to give you a comprehensive sort of high-res snapshot of what's happening right now and what's coming up in the skies. And what really stands out in these sources, I think, is just how dynamic and, well, interconnected the aviation industry is. You see challenges and innovations popping up everywhere.
Precisely. What we're seeing is this complex, almost symphonic interplay. You've got immediate operational pressures hitting hard.
Right now.
Right now. Then you have these incredibly forward-thinking human capital strategies looking long-term. And then these huge, long-range fleet projections. All of this together, it's going to shape air travel and, importantly, global cargo for, well, decades to come.
Decades.
It's a truly multifaceted picture, Every single decision seems to have these ripple effects right across the whole system.
And those ripples are really clear in our first story. This involves a major airline in Indonesia apparently doing a complete 180 on its fleet strategy. Can you walk us through that? Because it sounds pretty unexpected.
It is quite remarkable. And it's not just the U-turn itself, maybe, but the seeming desperation that might be driving it.
Okay.
So this airline is reportedly talking to a lessor, an aircraft leasing company, about getting a B737-88.
Yep.
And let's be super clear, that's the AX variant.
The MAX, okay.
Now, this is pretty astonishing when you remember they had this long-standing order for 49, the exact same type of plane.
49?
49.
Yeah.
An order they've actively publicly tried to cancel.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a severe strategic reversal, especially since, this particular aircraft type. The airline grounded it after that awful incident with another operator back in October 2018.
Right, I remember that.
And they actually returned their own single unit back in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So wanting it back now, it really underscores, I think, a profound capacity crunch they must be facing.
So the very plane they tried to get rid of, they're now trying to lease. What's behind this urgent need? Why now?
Well, it seems to boil down to pretty significant capacity shortages.
Yeah.
We're hearing a double-digit number of their aircraft are just stuck in maintenance.
What double digits? That's a lot for any airline.
It is. Now, there were claims floating around about maybe difficulties paying for the maintenance. The airline denied that, though.
Okay.
They attributed the groundings to those wider, global, industry-wide supply chain problems we keep hearing about.
Right, the parts shortages and delays.
Exactly. So this immediate operational crunch, whether it's pure supply chain issues or maybe some underlying financial strain, it seems to be forcing their hand. They need to get planes flying almost, by any means necessary, it seems.
And speaking of financials, there's been some movement there too, hasn't there? A big loan.
There has. The airline recently secured a pretty substantial shareholder loan. We're talking USD 405 million.
Wow.
And it's coming from Indonesia's sovereign wealth fund, basically, the state's investment arm, which importantly holds a majority stake in the airline already, about 64.5%.
So fresh capital is coming in. That should help, right?
It should, but it's really critical to look at where that money is actually going.
The details.
Always. The bulk of this money, over 72%, that's around USD 297 million, is specifically earmarked for their low-cost carrier unit.
Their LCC. Okay.
Right. Only the remainder, less than 30%, goes to the main full-service airline.
Interesting. What does that tell us?
Well, it certainly highlights their internal strategic priorities, doesn't it? It suggests where they see the most immediate growth potential, or maybe where the most urgent need for stabilization is within the group's overall operations.
Okay, so just to paint the full picture of this airline. Currently, their narrow-body fleet is 45 B737-800s.
The older generation, yeah.
Right, and overall, they're a scheduled carrier based in Jakarta, Soekarno-Hatta. Fleet size around 115 aircraft, hitting 52 destinations, 68 routes, running about 230 daily flights. It's a significant operation.
It definitely is. And what this whole situation just powerfully illustrates, I think, is how all these complex pressures, past incidents, current maintenance problems, financial injections, those broader supply chain weaknesses, they all converge.
Yeah.
And they force major fleet decisions. It's not just some delicate dance. It's a stark example of how operational survival in this kind of reactive environment can push long-term strategy onto the back burner.
So the immediate need overrides the plan.
Exactly. The key takeaway here, maybe, is that even major carriers are facing these real-time capacity crises. Crises that compel them to reverse big multi-year strategic plans. It really highlights aviation's vulnerability to global shocks and, the ripple effect of seemingly small things like just getting the right parts on time.
Okay, so we've just unpacked the pressures on the hardware side, planes, parts, money. But what about the people? The human element keeping everything running? Let's pivot now to a really interesting case study in workforce innovation. This one's from Singapore.
Right.
Looking at a ground handling and catering company, they seem to be taking a, well, strikingly proactive stance on employee longevity.
Yeah, this is a really progressive move, I'd say. This Singapore-based company, they've proactively raised their retirement age to 64
Okay.
and their reemployment age up to 69. This is for employees at their Singapore HQ, and it's effective immediately.
Immediately, so
Yeah.
no waiting around.
Nope. And what's really noteworthy here is that this is a full year ahead of when the Singapore government's own legislative change is scheduled to kick in.
Ah, so they're jumping the gun in a good way.
Exactly. She shows some forward-thinking leadership,
Yeah.
right? Anticipating regulatory shifts and actually embracing them early.
That's quite a commitment. What sort of impact is this policy likely to have on their people?
Well, it's expected to directly benefit over 700 employees. These are people reaching those new ages in 2025.
700 people, that's significant.
It is. And many of these folks, they've served the company for an average of 30 years. Impressive tenure.
30 years average, wow.
Yeah. And the company's stated reason. They say it reflects their dedication to building an inclusive, future-ready organization. Recognizing that mature employees who want to keep contributing their skills and, crucially, their deep experience are just invaluable assets.
It's a clear nod to institutional knowledge.
Absolutely.
Right.
Something you just can't replace overnight.
And it seems they're not just, changing the age numbers on paper, they're backing this up with other initiatives, too.
They are, yeah. To really make long-term employability work, the company has rolled out these quite comprehensive job redesign initiatives.
Job redesign, what does that entail?
Basically, creating more fulfilling, more sustainable career paths for their workforce, maybe adjusting roles to better suit experienced workers or changing needs.
Okay, makes sense.
And beyond that, they're committed to continuous learning and development. For all employees, importantly, regardless of age, making sure everyone stays equipped for, evolving job requirements in what's a rapidly changing industry.
So it's a holistic approach.
Very much so. Human capital through and through.
Can you give us any specific examples of the training they're offering?
Sure. They have this employee development program. It's open to everyone. It includes modules on really vital topics, things like cultivating a growth mindset or respecting differences in the workplace, fostering a better, more collaborative environment.
Soft skills, but crucial ones.
Absolutely. And then for employees in roles that specifically need digital skills, they get targeted training too, making sure they can perform effectively in today's, increasingly tech-driven aviation world.
Right.
And if you step back, this collaboration they have with their union partners and with the National Trades Union Congress on these training projects, it's not just about individuals getting new skills.
Oh.
No, it significantly boosts the overall workforce efficiency. And crucially, it enables those older, really experienced workers to extend their careers, staying on as valuable contributors.
So pulling back again, what does this approach really signal for the wider aviation industry, especially in a hub like Singapore?
Oh, I think this approach is absolutely crucial, essential for building a dynamic, adaptable workforce, particularly as Singapore keeps strengthening its position as a major regional aviation hub.
Right.
Competition is fierce.
Exactly. And this really highlights the importance of genuinely investing in your human capital. Recognizing that experience, coupled with continuous learning, these are vital assets. They're not easily or quickly replaced, especially in a skilled, safety-critical industry like aviation services.
It's a potential model then.
Definitely. A model for retaining that invaluable institutional knowledge and expertise. Hugely important.
Okay. Now let's shift focus again, this time to a challenge with, well, pretty profound implications for global supply chains, for international trade. Let's talk air cargo.
Right.
A major U.S. cargo carrier has put out a rather stark warning about the future, specifically about wide-body freighter capacity.
Yes, indeed. It's a significant forecast. Quite sobering, actually. The chief executive officer of this U.S.-based cargo airline predicts a structural shortage of wide-body freighter capacity.
Structural, meaning not just a blip.
Not just a blip. He says it will extend well towards the 2040s. Decades.
Towards the 2040s. Wow. Why? What's driving this?
Well, he explains that the growth of wide-body freighter capacity, the big planes that carry most of the cargo, it's just struggling to keep pace with demand.
Demand is outstripping supply.
Fundamentally, yes. Primarily because older aircraft are retiring, being taken out of service, faster than new ones are coming in to replace them.
Okay.
And this, he says, is creating a situation that we haven't seen before. It indicates a really fundamental, almost unprecedented shift in the global supply dynamics for air cargo.
And the aircraft production pipeline seems to really crystallize this problem, doesn't it?
It does. One of the major manufacturers, Boeing, is ending production of its current big freighter, the B777-200F model, in 2027.
Ending production soon.
Yeah. And deliveries of the next generation freighters, that's things like the B777-8F from Boeing and the A350F from Airbus, they're not slated to even begin until late 2027, or more likely early 2028.
And that's assuming no further production delays,
Which, let's be honest, are always a possibility in aerospace.
Right, so that creates a gap.
Precisely. It means there will be, quote, at least one calendar year with 0 new freighters entering the market.
0 for a whole year.
0 new ones, which will obviously intensify the shortage significantly during that period and likely have knock-on effects.
So this raises a really big question then. If we think bigger picture, what does a structural, decades-long capacity constraint actually mean for global commerce, for logistics worldwide?
Well, it suggests a pretty fundamental rethink might be needed, How goods get transported around the world could change. It could impact everything from manufacturing supply chains, maybe making them less just in time, to consumer pricing for imported goods.
And just so listeners have a sense of this carrier making the warning they're based at New York JFK, operate about 91 aircraft, serve 8 destinations currently with 23 routes, running about 9 daily flights. They're a significant player, clearly seeing these long-term trends.
Yeah, they're right in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And this kind of structural shortage, it means there's just no easy, quick fix. You can't just suddenly build more giant freighters overnight.
No magic wand.
No magic wand. It's likely going to force industries that rely heavily on air freight, think high-value electronics, pharmaceuticals, perishables, to really reevaluate their entire logistics strategies.
How so? What might change?
Well, we could see a shift. Maybe more goods moving via ocean freight, even if it's slower, for things that aren't super time sensitive. Perhaps more nearshoring or reshoring of manufacturing, bringing production closer to home to reduce reliance on long-haul air transport.
Less distance to cover.
Exactly. Or maybe even just a reprioritization of what really needs to fly, which could lead to potentially higher costs for those goods that absolutely must use air freight. The implications, especially for those global just-in-time supply chains we've become so used to, are pretty profound.
Okay, so we've covered a really fascinating spectrum today. We started with an airline's surprising U-turn, driven by immediate operational needs. Then we looked at a very forward-thinking approach to valuing experienced workers in aviation services.
Yeah, the human side.
And finally, this significant long-term warning about global air cargo capacity. It really does underscore how deeply connected these things are, even if they seem like separate issues on the surface.
Absolutely. Each piece, on its own, gives you valuable insight. But it's when you connect them, like we've tried to do, that you gain that much richer understanding of the complex forces really at play across the entire aviation industry right now.
Right.
These aren't just isolated incidents happening in different corners. They're symptoms, they're solutions, all interacting within this constantly evolving global system, influenced by everything from, tiny component supply chains and big geopolitical shifts to demographic changes and those fundamental aircraft production cycles we just talked about.
So what does all this mean for you, our listener? Well, it means the aviation world is just a place of constant, interconnected flux. It demands not just adaptability, but really sharp strategic thinking and innovative solutions, whether you're talking fleet management, human resources, or global logistics. And for you, it highlights how these seemingly disparate elements, a specific aircraft variant, a maintenance supply chain snag, a progressive HR policy, they're all actually critical indicators of an airline's resilience, its responsiveness, and ultimately its future trajectory in this complex global economy.
Well said.
So here's a final provocative thought for you to maybe mull over after we wrap up. How will these intertwined trends, everything from aircraft availability and supply chain resilience to human capital management and those shifting global trade patterns, how will they ultimately reshape the very way we fly and the way we move goods around the world in the coming decade? And maybe more excitingly, what entirely new innovations might emerge to meet these really pressing and long-term challenges?